Hello, friends. Good evening. Today, I have come up with a pure theory topic that is initiation of normal labor, role of fetus and placenta. The reason is when I was a PG, a part of this actually, that is phases of parturition, came as a 35 marks question. Many of my classmates were actually flabbergasted looking at that question. They didn't know what to write. But luckily, I had read Williams and it is beautifully given in Williams. So I could write a very good answer. Even now, this is a typical theory question in basic sciences. And I thought if I take this lecture, it would help you to write a good essay question of 15 to 20 marks. So let's not waste time and jump into the topic, that is initiation of labor, the role of fetus and the placenta. I would be talking on two things, that is factors influencing initiation of labor and then role of fetoplacental unit. So let's first take up factors influencing initiation of labor. This is what I was talking about, phases of parturition. Many students confuse this for stages of labor. That's totally wrong. Phases of parturition is beautifully given in Williams, and it has got 4 phases. Incidentally, labor also has 4 stages and students get confused. Let's see what is this phases of parturition. The first phase is a phase of quiescence. It is prelude to parturition. In fact, it starts from the conception up to almost 9 months of pregnancy, throughout pregnancy, or 40 weeks of pregnancy. We can call this a phase of contractile unresponsiveness, where the uterus does not normally respond to any stimulus, including the uterotonics. Of course, towards the end, it will respond. But in the initial days, you need heavy doses of uterotonics to make it responsive. So in the usual sense, it is contractile unresponsive state or phase. Here, the cervix just softens. The phase 2 is also called activation phase, where the uterus is preparing itself for labor, and we can call this a phase of cervical ripening. Basically, the changes happen in the cervix here, and that we call cervical ripening. And this phase is responsive very nicely to the uterotonics that we give, which I was explaining yesterday. So it is also like initiation of parturition. Then comes phase 3, or phase of stimulation, or it's a process of labor. Now, in this phase come all the 4 stages of labor. 3 stages it is written here. We call sometimes the time after the delivery of placenta also as a stage, and that is called stage 4, which some books mention as stage of observation. But myself and Dr. Pratap heavily object to that answer, because observation has to be done from stage 1, 2, 3, including 4. So what is then stage 4? Stage 4 is a stage where there is permanent contraction, retraction, and of course it proceeds to involution of the uterus. So this phase is a phase of uterine contraction, which will definitely is accompanied with cervical dilatation, fetal and placental expulsion, and thereafter, as I just now said, the permanent uterine contraction and retraction. So all these 4 stages of labor, what we call, they all come under phase 3, or is the phase of stimulation or processes of labor. Then we have phase 4, phase of involution, parturient recovery. we can call it a phase of uterine involution, where the uterus, as I said, retracts and makes a permanent contraction stage, and it becomes almost like a normal non-pregnant uterus. It involutes it. Of course, it takes 6 weeks to do that completely. Even then, it may not go back to its gynecological size. Also, what happens in this particular phase is cervical repair. Suppose the cervix was not torn to an extent where you didn't have to put stitches, but definitely cervix becomes ragged edges and it has to heal itself. And of course, this time there is also breastfeeding. So after 3 to 6 months, depending upon whether the mother has fed the baby continuously and exclusively, the ovulation resumes somewhere after maybe sometimes 6 weeks, but sometimes 12 weeks, but most of the time it is between 12 weeks to 6 months. So fertility is restored once the ovulation restarts. So these are the 4 phases of parturition. And if this alone comes as a question, you have to explain very nicely about each phase a little bit more in detail. Of course, my next slide is going to talk about what are the factors that influence or what are the hormones that influence these 4 phases. Maybe you can elaborate more on the cervical ripening. I have one more lecture on cervical changes during pregnancy and of course, cervical changes during ripening. You can borrow something from there, on you can borrow your knowledge of all the 4 stages of labor and put it in the phase 3, and then the involution process, cervical repair process, and the milk formation, milk letting down reflex, and all those things. And you have to make a very beautiful answer, which is worth maybe even 35 marks. I don't see any question paper having 35 marks now. Maximum is 20 marks. But you must develop the art of constructing an answer, if you have not done it before, in the examination hall itself by borrowing the knowledge that is there in the different compartments of your brain. It is all there stored. So if you just spend 2-3 minutes quietly, you will get all of that and you can organize yourself. The best is to prepare such long answers beforehand and put it in a long notebook. And maybe you can refer to my lectures as well. So I was talking about the factors that regulate the different phases, or we can actually say the hormones that regulate the different phases. Phase 1, which is the phase of quiescence, where the uterus is largely unresponsive to any harsh stimuli. And which are the basic hormones that are responsive? One is progesterone, the other one is relaxin. That's exactly why progesterone is used if there is threatened abortion. There's a lot of controversy in that, but then it's a universal fact that progesterone has got many mechanisms by which it makes the uterus quiescent, and it is made use of. Relaxin is another hormone which also helps in the uterus to relax. Of course, we all know HCG is the hormone of the pregnancy, and especially one which is released from the corpus luteum in the early part of pregnancy is going to support the pregnancy totally. That's exactly why in IVF cycles, to support the luteal phase, we also give HCG injections in addition to progesterone. Phase 2 is a phase of activation where the cervix starts ripening, and it is like almost like a pre-labor phase. The hormones that majorly influence or regulate this phase are estrogen and hyaluronin. Hyaluronin actually helps in the breaking down of the collagen fibers and then make the cervix softer. Now, estrogen, yesterday I was explaining this, towards the end of pregnancy, in that particular time of the term pregnancy, the ratio between estrogen and progesterone changes in favor of estrogen. So that is the one which actually makes the uterus respond to the uterotonics. I'm going to explain this a little more in subsequent slides. Also, the fetal signals are very important in this phase. Maybe CRH is the hormone. I'm going to elaborate on that. They also influence the initiation of labor. Now, phase 3, phase of stimulation, or the phase of all the stages of labor, it's easy guess which are the hormones prominent here: prostaglandin and oxytocin. I'm going to elaborate more on these two hormones, so let me not talk much right now. And then we have the phase 4, phase of involution. And here, mostly oxytocin to make the uterus contract. But more than that, we have to have the recovery or involution. Inflammatory cell activation is the one which does all the repair work, the damaged cervix, the damaged muscles, and everything. And then slowly the uterus goes back to its gynecological, level or phase. Now, the cause of onset of labor is the most important question. And the usual disclaimer is that the exact cause and the mechanism for the onset of labor are not known. This is a standard statement before we explain any cause or etiology or other things, mechanisms. Having said that, there are a lot of theories, and the two main theories are: number one is functional loss of pregnancy maintenance factors. The factors that maintain pregnancy lose their functionality, and that's why there is initiation of labor, is one theory. The other theory is synthesis of factors that induce parturition. The factors that were maintaining lose their function, whereas the new factors are synthesized that will induce actually labor or parturition. So these are the two main theories. Let's see into these two theories in the subsequent slides. So the onset of labor, there are two issues. One is the timing. When should it start? How is it decided? Who decides it? It's not the mother, it's the fetus which decides to come out. It is so wonderful that I don't know how the fetus knows. We'll see, we'll look into it, how the fetus knows that now it is time to come out. And it decides by and large. I'm talking about natural labor, right? So it's of course, the induced labor, it's the obstetrician who decides to get the baby out or initiate the labor. But in a natural process, it is the fetus who decides the timing of onset of labor. Then who initiates? The fetus decides the timing, but it cannot initiate itself. So it takes the help of placenta and fetal membranes to initiate the process of labor. So it's such a wonderful orchestra where each has a different role. One actually does the timing or the rhythm, the other one starts the notes, and then the whole symphony will go on. Evidence supports a hormonal basis also. In fact, both fetoplacental unit, I should say, they will work through the hormones. In fact, you can't say it's a separate theory or separate basis. They all work together in harmony. So which are the hormones that help in onset of labor? LH and HCG. Let's see whether they help or whether they actually do not help, or how do they help, if at all they help. The receptors of these hormones are greater during pregnancy. That's what we saw in the phase 1, quiescent phase. HCG, LH, progesterone, they help in relaxation of the uterus. Then how do they help in onset of labor? They help by sacrificing themselves. That means during labor, they decrease themselves. They sacrifice themselves. They go down. And when they go down, then there can be an upper hand of estrogen, right? So LH and HCG, they help indirectly by decreasing themselves towards term, right? Not directly. Whereas relaxin hormone, how does it help? Again, the word relaxin suggests that uterus is going to relax with this. Then how do they help? Again, the same way. It helps in inhibition of myometrial contractions. So when its role goes down, the contractions will take upper hand. So relaxin should go down during labor. CRH, that is corticotropin releasing hormone, their levels increase sharply during last 6 to 8 weeks of pregnancy. That's where, 6 to 8 weeks means almost 2 months, and it is almost corresponding to 32 weeks, which is the right time for preterm labor. So if it increases too much, then there will be preterm labor. If it is slowly rising and becomes a peak at the time of term, then the labor will be initiated at term only. So their levels increase sharply during last 6 to 8 weeks of pregnancy, and they have a role in timing of human parturition. We'll see more of it in the next slide or subsequent slide. Now I talk about the progesterone. As I said, it reduces muscle excitability. So if the muscle has to get excited, progesterone has to go down. There's a dramatic decline of maternal plasma progesterone concentration prior to the onset of labor. Dramatic decline is the word that you have to remember. Progesterone means pregnancy, P for P. So if you want the pregnancy to be on, progesterone is the hormone. And whereas estrogen is the one which ends, E for E. So ends the pregnancy by initiating labor. Easy to remember. Estrogen ends, progesterone perpetuates, or progesterone protects the pregnancy, or pregnancy will go on with it. So estrogen induces myometrial excitability, whereas progesterone reduces, estrogen increases or induces. It stimulates prostaglandin synthesis. This, if you recall, in endometriosis pain management or mechanism, I have given you the beautiful relationship of COX-2 inhibitors, which will increase estrogen, and estrogen will increase progesterone, and prostaglandin, and prostaglandin itself will increase then the COX-2 inhibitors. So vicious circle I have shown you. Here again, when estrogen increases, it stimulates prostaglandin synthesis. And all of us know the role of prostaglandin in initiation of labor. It sensitizes the myometrium so that it responds to oxytocin or any other stimulant. So see here the role of estrogen. It induces myometrial excitability. First of all, it makes the muscle to get excited. And who will excite the muscle? It's the prostaglandin and oxytocin. So estrogen will stimulate prostaglandin synthesis, and it sensitizes the myometrium so that it responds to oxytocin or any other stimulant. So this is the beauty of the just two hormones that we have. That's what I always tell even to my patients, that we have just two hormones and they can have different timings, different role, and different concentrations will make it, play different games. So here estrogen actually does three things. One is it sensitizes the myometrium so that it responds to oxytocin. It induces myometrial excitability and also stimulates prostaglandins. Everything that is needed for initiation of labor is actually done by estrogen. So that is why I was trying to tell since yesterday that the ratio, estrogen to progesterone ratio, has to be altered in favor of estrogen. Then the labor sets in. Then the inducing agent will work well, and then there will be a successful induction of labor. So progesterone protects, estrogen ends the pregnancy. P for P, E for E. So oxytocin. Well, from time immemorial, we know that oxytocin is the one which makes the uterus contract. No doubt in that at all, but it is not primarily responsible for onset of labor. I have tried to increase the font up to 60. Can you see that? The font is very, very big here. It is not primarily responsible for the onset of labor. That's why yesterday also I was telling, long back when I was a PG, we used to use oxytocin for induction of labor, ripening of cervixes wrongly. We didn't understand that term properly. That is the beauty of science in general. It is evolving. The understanding becomes better and better and better. That doesn't mean that it keeps changing and we can't believe that. The beauty of science is that it is not hesitant to say, I do not know. I want to know. That is the beauty of science. So, oxytocin primarily not responsible for onset of labor, but once the labor sets in, oxytocin knows what to do. It basically does the job of accelerator. So you cannot start the car with oxytocin, but once the car is started, kick-started by prostaglandin, then oxytocin does the job of a accelerator. So fetal production has been demonstrated, but pathways by which it reaches myometrium is not established. So fetus also probably produces oxytocin, but we don't know how it exactly reaches the area of myometrium. Prostaglandins. So this is the drug that has been now totally changed the game. It's been there, but we understood this drug, and then the whole game changed. So it is intimately connected to the onset of labor. It is intimately connected to the onset of labor, and it can initiate uterine contractions at any stage of pregnancy. So I have increased the font also to suggest at any stage of pregnancy. That is exactly why now it is prostaglandin and prostaglandin and prostaglandin. That is prostaglandin in first trimester, prostaglandin in second trimester, prostaglandin in third trimester. So all the 3 times it is prostaglandin which can initiate uterine contractions. That's exactly why, in fact, it has taken over the surgical abortions also, right? So it is prostaglandin that initiates the contractions any time of pregnancy. So having explained the phases of parturition, the stages of labor, different hormones that influence these phases, and how exactly they change the whole environment and how they initiate and how they augment labor, let us now understand the second part of my talk, that is the role of feto-placental unit. I've given you some clues that the fetus decides the timing, placenta obeys the fetal instructions, but how do they work in a harmony? That's what is going to be seen now. The role of feto-placental unit. When the fetus is stressed, I put it in inverted commas. Stress means not psychologically stressed. The stress is usually used the word for the psychological stress, but here stress is maybe stress because of preeclampsia, stress because of hypoxia, stress because of any other hostile intrauterine environment. Stress may be also because of the diabetic, gestational diabetes. So whatever it is, when the fetus is stressed due to various reasons, the concentrations of corticotropin releasing hormone in fetal plasma, amniotic fluid, and maternal plasma are increased. You already saw one mention about CRH in the previous section of my talk. So let us look into it more elaborately now. So it is believed to be mainly from placenta. So the CRH, though it comes from is seen in fetal plasma, amniotic fluid, and maternal plasma, where is it coming from? It is coming from placenta mainly. That is the connection. So fetus somehow sends a signal to placenta to increase the CRH whenever it is stressed. How does it exactly do? We have to get to understand maybe. The placental corticotropin releasing hormone plays a role in timing and regulation of partition. This is the meaning of how fetus is the one who takes the call, and fetus is responsible for timing of initiation of labor. And of course, through CRH, it regulates the parturition. So that is the connection, feto-placental contribution. In phase 2 and 3, that is, I'm talking about phases of parturition, the modification in the CRH receptor favors a switch from cyclical AMP formation to increased myometrial cell calcium levels via protein kinase C activation. So phase 1 is quiescent phase or quiescence. where progesterone is the leading hormone and it makes sure that uterus is relaxed. But in phase 2, when cervical ripening happens or pre-labor or preparation for labor, and phase 3, of course, is the actual full-fledged labor, the CRH receptors favor a switch from cyclical AMP formation to increase myometrial cell calcium levels. That's how the uterus becomes very active and excited. CRH augments the concentration, the contraction-inducing potency of a given dose of oxytocin in human myometrial state. So it not only does that switch of cyclic AMP, it also augments the contraction-inducing potency of a given dose of oxytocin. So when you give oxytocin for augmentation, not inducing actually, so it will augment that potency as well. CRH stimulates fetal adrenal C19 steroid synthesis. See how many ways, different ways the CRH helps. One is it will make sure that the cyclic AMP is changed into the, as we saw just now, protein kinase C activation. The second one is it augments the contraction inducing potency of a given dose of oxytocin, right? And the third thing that it does is it stimulates the fetal adrenal to produce C19 steroid synthesis, thereby increasing substrate for placental aromatization. Now, when you hear the word aromatization, what is going to come up? Which hormone is going to come up? The hormone that is going to come up is obviously estrogen, right? To produce estrogen. So now everything falls into place. So why estrogen increases during term? We have seen the connection. During last 6 to 8 weeks of pregnancy, the fetus produces CRH. Is responsible for producing CRH through placenta maybe, and the production is increased if the fetus is stressed. And we all know during last 6 to 8 weeks is the very crucial time for the fetus when all the medical problems of the mother increase, right? Even otherwise, the last 6 to 8 weeks CRH increases. And CRH is the one which stimulates fetal adrenal. Again, fetus is involved here. That's why you cannot separate fetus and placenta. The fetal adrenal secretes C19 steroid, and that is a substrate for the estrogen. And who does that production? Placenta, through aromatization. So that's why slowly placental levels increase and progesterone's level decrease. And CRH also makes sure that uterine muscle fibers get excited, and it will do all that is necessary by increasing calcium levels inside the muscle, by decreasing the cyclic AMP. So everything is now in place. An increased production of estrogens would shift the EP ratio in favor of estrogen and promote the expression of a series of myometrial contractile proteins. So estrogen will increase all the contractile proteins that are required for uterine contraction. Such a wonderful way these hormones, these chemicals beautifully play in a beautiful harmonious way to make sure that from a very quiet uterus into the one which robustly contracts and pushes the baby out. And baby is also involved. It doesn't leave everything to the mother and the obstetrician. Baby itself decides the timing. It will give right signals to the placenta. Placenta obeys the baby and it will produce the CRH. And then they themselves produce estrogen. And estrogen will stimulate the prostaglandins. Prostaglandins will make sure that the uterus gets excited, and it will make the uterus contract. And once the uterus contracts, the oxytocin, which will be secreted, and that will also help in accelerating the labor. Such a beautiful orchestra. Fetal placental maternal orchestra, that's why I've given this heading for this particular slide. So the fetus secretes cortisol, DHEAS. Placenta will secrete CRH, cortisol during stress, isn't it? So whenever there is stress, fetus produces cortisol. And that's exactly why we give steroids for lung maturity. And that's exactly why we tell when there is preeclampsia, when there is stress, there is automatic lung maturity, the earlier lung maturity or the quicker lung maturity. Same thing happens in case of twins as well. They are mature earlier compared to other normal, so-called normal fetuses. So placenta will secrete three things, all required: CRH, oxytocin, and prostaglandin. So who gives the signal? Fetus gives the signal, especially when it is stressed. When it is stressed, you see, it is so beautiful, it is so natural. When it is stressed inside, it wants to come out. How does it tell? It cannot cry. Maybe it is crying, but it has to tell somehow. It can't tell the mother directly, so it will tell its friend placenta who is sitting next to it. And placenta will secrete all the chemicals and it will make the uterus. It will tell the uterus, now contract, and uterus will throw out the baby and baby will come to this beautiful world. So wonderful. It's like a beautiful story, isn't it? So you can never forget this, how beautifully everybody has a role in initiation of labor. And everything is started by the fetus itself. So mother also has to chip in. She'll say, if the fetus is struggling so much, if the placenta is doing so much, what am I sitting quietly for? So mother also helps. Mother helps by increasing gap junctions, uterine receptors for prostaglandin and oxytocin, and increased contraction associated proteins. So everybody is so beautifully working hand in glove. Fetus will cry out by gives the signals through cortisols, and placenta will respond to the cry by secreting CRH, oxytocin, prostaglandin, and mother helps both of them by increasing gap junctions, uterine receptor for PG and oxytocin, and increases the concentration of associated proteins, and the uterus contracts. So beautiful. So I will sum up everything in 2 slides now. Fetal cortisol reduces placental progesterone production as well. Wow, that's what we wanted. And it decreases there is a decrease in suppression of myometrial activity by progesterone. So when progesterone goes down, myometrial activity suppression goes down. And there is an increase in estrogen. So there is an alteration of EP ratio and hence the formation of prostaglandin. Estrogen means prostaglandin, which enhances the formation of gap junctions in myometrium and produces the right proteins which help in contraction of the muscle fibers. And there is a production of PG which in decidua and fetal membranes because of the estrogen secretion, and it increases in output of oxytocin from the posterior pituitary, increases the synthesis or release of prostaglandin. So one is kickstarting the other process. And then there is oxytocin inhibiting binding of calcium, thus increasing its amount in the myometrium. Earlier, we have seen that CRH also increases the calcium inside the myometrium by decreasing the cyclic AMP. So all together, there is labor. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. I hope you understood this well. And let me talk about induction of labor tomorrow. In fact, I have come in a little wrong way. I should have taken this class first, then the induction of labor, and then I should have talked about failed induction. Maybe I will talk again about failed induction properly some other time. Thank you very much.